Hi Chirag, welcome to the first episode of In Conversation with your MBA buddy. And for this episode, you are the buddy because you will be taking the hard questions and trying to answer those by sharing your experiences and journey with us. So thanks for doing this.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So let me take this opportunity to introduce you to our viewers so that they have a better context of your answers. You are an IIT BHU graduate. You worked for more than 4.5 years in the software industry working for Oracle and Microsoft. You cracked GMAT with a 750 score. You got fantastic admits like the Ross, Tepper and the one-year Cornell Tech program. Currently you are pursuing your MBA from the Tepper School of Business. You want to pursue product management after your MBA degree and you will be starting your internship with eBay early next week. It's an extensive list. Have I missed anything in this?
No, thanks. I think you have pretty much covered everything. That's a fairly good intro. Thanks.
So Chirag, we'll start with your GMAT journey. So the first question to you is, when did you start contemplating about giving the GMAT exam? Or you were always sorted that you want to give GMAT and study and pursue your MBA from abroad?
Sure. So in my journey, I got to understand about GMAT when I was in fourth year of my college. That is when I learned that some of my friends had applied to programs like Yale Silver Scholars Program, which are intended for final year students. That is when I realized about GMAT, but by that time I was a little late for all of these 2+2 programs. So I eventually decided that I will just go on to work for 2 years because I had my dream job at Oracle. So I wanted to really gain experience of at least 2 years. And then it made sense for me to take the GMAT. So I took it in 2018, which is 2 years after joining Oracle.
So that actually says that experience matters a lot when it comes to your B school admit, right?
Right. So at that point of time, I did apply to ISB, but I was a little short of 2 years in experience. So I got rejected at that point of time for some reason. But then I stayed back for another year. That is when Microsoft happened. And then the next year, I took a consultant and I started applying to more B schools, especially in the US.
So how was your experience managing your work along with the GMAT preparation? Because a lot of people on my YouTube comment that how should we prepare GMAT alongside our work? We don't get enough time to do that. What will be your what was your experience and what will be some of the tips that you want to share with us?
Sure. I think it's a very common place to be in. A lot of people are working by the time when they prepare to, take the GMAT. So I was on the same boat. And one thing that helped me really was that I was not too much outside of college. So I was just 2 years outside college. So I was still in touch with some of the things, and I had prepared for my college placements as well as for CAT. So my aptitude was not as bad. So that's why I thought, I should just focus on English more. And quant is something that I was fortunately good at. So I thought, let's just, take some time outside of work. And that way I started looking at my schedule. And then I realized that, I have a couple hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. So I had a schedule where I would study for 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening after office. My manager was also very cooperative here. I mentioned to him that I was planning to take the GMAT, and he was very supportive on it. He would not, hold me back for a lot of work. He would just ask me to get my work done, how much ever time I wanted to take and whenever I wanted to do it. So that way there was a lot of support from my manager at that time. And because of that, I was able to, take out these 3 or 4 hours every single day out of my work schedule.
So my next question actually is about how long did you take to prepare for your GMAT? Was it in months, weeks, or what was the duration that you took?
Yeah. So for myself, I'm a very lazy person. So I thought I'll only become serious about GMAT preparation once I finalize the date. So what I did was that I took a date which was 42 days from the day I actually booked it. So that's how I did it. I thought I'll take just 6 weeks and prepare as much as I can. And in fact, what I did was within these 6 weeks as well, I took most of the initial days to really do a lot of heavy lifting. And towards the end, I just wanted to cool myself down and calm myself, because before every exam, I have that sense of, anxiety, because I've learned everything. I have taken a lot of practice tests and everything. But even then, I want to keep myself calm before the exam, so because of that, I took a couple of days to a week towards the last for just cooling down.
So you got a 750 score in just 6 weeks. So you are one of those stories that we read on GMAT Club. It's a fantastic feat.
Yeah, that's, I think, a little too much, but yes, I did it in 6 weeks. Yeah, I did struggle with verbal. For all of my practice exams that I took, most of my practice exams, I would score 50 or 51 on quant. But on the verbal side, I was always scoring low. And then my focus was shifting from sentence correction to, to reasoning. And then my weak points would shift from sometimes sentence correction to RC and to CR. So I would always be shuffling between all of these sections within verbal, but quant was definitely a comfort zone for me. So when preparing, I would just spend an hour or even less every day on quant, and I would do that in the beginning, so that that built my concentration up, and then I would study a chapter or a subject within verbal within that concentration.
So that's a very interesting point, because a lot of people don't understand that their weakness can be outside SC, because
right.
We usually go and pinpoint that SC is my weakness, but it can be CR as well as RC. And especially the RCs especially people are very ignorant about the RCs, but they don't understand
right.
that you get a chain of 4 to 6 questions for one passage. And if you miss out
right.
on those questions, then your verbal scores drastically drop.
Absolutely. I think you have very rightly pointed out that there would be a chain of 3 questions, 4 questions, or 5 questions on a specific passage. So if you neglect that part, you lose out on a lot of questions. And losing out on those questions also means that since it is a computer adaptive test, it would give you easier questions, which would get you lesser score eventually.
So now shifting gears to your admission process. So while you were shortlisting these schools, what was the process or the framework that you used? And were you only looking at the US schools, or you were also looking at other geographies?
Initially, I was very naive with applications. So I was thinking of NTU in Singapore, and then I had LBS in London. I had INSEAD on my list. But then I reached out to a consultant to just understand how it works. And since it's their daily job, I had to just tell him my requirements, that I need to get into the tech industry, and I need to also, have a scholarship, possibly if at all I can get one. And then based on that, we came up with a list of some ambitious schools and some safe schools. And that is where I, ruled out all of these schools which did not make much sense for me. For example, INSEAD or LBS, they did not make much sense because all of the tech companies you would find headquartered in the US. So I think that's what made sense to me at that point of time. And based on my profile, my GMAT score, and all things combined, my consultant suggested me some schools where I could possibly get a scholarship. So I decided to only apply to those schools. Hence, I did not apply to schools like Harvard, MIT, Yale. I think in hindsight, I should have, but then I did not end up applying because I might not have been able to, get a scholarship at those places.
That's a very interesting point, because we both know that how important scholarships were for us. Yeah. And as far as I remember, you had 3 admits: Ross, Cornell Tech, and the Tepper, which you were contemplating among. And you chose Tepper out of the 3 because it was offering you A higher scholarship
That's
and
right.
a very decent proposal of employment and other guarantees, right? So was scholarship the only criteria?
Sure. So I talked to a lot of people, and I realized eventually that, no B school would open extra doors for you. For example, if I were to pick Ross over Tepper, it would also still open the same doors and give me exposure of the same companies in tech. If I were to do consulting, for example, or investment banking, I would have thought of different things like proximity to industries, to companies, and those things. But here it did not make much sense to me since I wanted to stay in tech. So that's when I thought of the whole deal. So if I were to pick Ross now, I would have to take a loan which was 2x. And being an international student, you of course understand taking a huge loan would give you sleepless nights. So I took CMU because as an overall deal, it was good for me. And also, I did talk to a lot of people who had taken both the paths, people who had been on the same junction as I was in, people who ended up choosing Ross, they also ended up taking good roles in the future, and they also ended up at great places. And people who chose Tepper, and in fact even Foster for that matter, they also ended up at the places they want to be. So I thought that CMU as a brand is also a great brand. The computer science school is of course number one in the world, so that was also an added incentive for me to pick Tepper.
Again, a very valid point here because a lot of people who contacted me, they were very possessive about the M7s, the Ivy Leagues, and the higher rank, better ranked schools. But what they don't understand is that chances of getting scholarships also reduces if you apply for a higher ranked school. Whereas schools like Foster or Arizona State University, they offer you almost the same opportunity at fraction of the cost. So why wouldn't one apply to those schools?
Absolutely.
Even if you want to just keep those schools as your safe bets, but there's no harm in applying to those schools, right?
Yeah, I think Foster is a school which has been underestimated quite a lot. But for people who are interested in tech, Foster is a great school. Although the ranking is not the best, it will offer you a better deal for sure. In fact, I remember back in my time, the deal that I got from Foster was actually cheaper for me than ISB for all the 2 years. And then I would end up,
So actually currently what you are doing, I think year on year basis, it would still be
yes,
cheaper than the ISB option
yes,
because of the scholarship that you have received.
yeah.
So let me just go back again to your application phase. So while you were applying, what was the most frightening part of the application for you? Was it the essays, LORs, or interviews?
Oh, yeah. So this is a very good question. I think for me, initially, just applying to B schools and presenting yourself in the best possible form, which is in the form of essays, that was the first major hurdle because I was, of course, working and I was not able to spend a lot of time on these applications. So that is why I decided to take a consultant who would, push me and also do most of the heavy lifting for me. But eventually, I ended up being behind the consultant himself. So I got into a lot of it. So I started writing my essays and then I got them edited by the consultant. And I think, that was half the battle won for me because the consultant did a great job with the essays. And when I moved on to the interview phase, again, it was a new experience because by now I had been on the other side of the table of interviews. I had been taking interviews of people at Microsoft and Oracle. But coming back to the other side gave me chills. I remember during my Ross interview, I was sweating and I was just wiping the sweat off of my forehead. And in fact, there would be questions, of course, in interviews that you cannot anticipate beforehand. So I would say you should not definitely, get shaken by it. You should take your time, hold your calm, and think about it. And eventually, you will definitely get the right answer that you want to put forward. In my case, a couple of interviews I remember had questions which I had no idea about. And then just because I panicked, I lost out on, in fact, even answering it within close range of the question. But then when I realized and when I started to correct this problem, I got better at it. And I started to realize that if you stay calm, then you can definitely make up something from, of course, your real life and make up an answer and then give that to your interviewer.
So you would have taken a lot of mock interviews, right? So did you course correct during the mock interviews, or you skipped the mock interviews part and directly went ahead with your B school interviews?
Yeah, so I was a bit lazy on the mock interview side. I had just one mock interview with my consultant. That is when I got a reality check. That is when I understood that a lot of my answers are sounding robotic and not coming out naturally and conversationally. So that is when I started, re-looking at my answers and started to not have a script per se this time and just have bullet points that I wanted to hit, and then I would weave everything into an answer on the fly. So that is how I started off, and then I remember interviewing for Darden. That was my first interview after a long time. So I was a bit nervous there. And in fact, I did some of the mistakes from the mock interviews here as well. But that is when I realized that no, this is not something that can carry on. And that is when I course corrected and started to, improve on my delivery side of things. And eventually it worked out well for me because all of the next 5 interviews that I had, I got to crack them all. There are a couple of things. Firstly, we have talked about this, that, interviewers are also normal human beings. They are not people who you need to be scared of. So I would say keep it as conversational as possible. Do not make things sound robotic at all. Be very genuine about your stories because some interviewers tend to dive deeper into your answers. So be very, very authentic and genuine about your stories. And in fact, I would also say, from my in-person experience, I would say that, when I was very nervous, I was also speeding up. So that is also a common problem that happens with people because when you're nervous and you want to get something out of your head, you tend to speak it really fast. That is also one common problem that I've seen, especially among Indians, because English is not our native language, right? So that is also one thing to look out for.
Just one question here. Did you find any difficulty with the accent of the interviewer?
Oh yeah, I did. Yes, I did. Because in fact, some of the adcoms are not even from the US, so they have different accents that you might not be able to catch up. So in that sense, it's very normal to ask the question back to them, and if you have not understood something, you can of course always ask them to explain the question to you, so they can also in some cases rephrase the question for you, which makes you understand the question better. For example, I remember very well one of my questions was what is your favorite pet peeve? And I didn't understand what a pet peeve is until that point of time. So I just asked my interviewer I'm sorry, I don't understand what a pet peeve is. And that is when she explained it to me, and then I could answer it well. So there's no harm in asking for clarification and explanation about.
So moving on to the next phase of your MBA journey. So we both got the admits in 2020 and we both took 2 different paths. You chose to go ahead with your admit, I chose to defer the admit. And a lot of students right now are having the same anxiety because 2021 is more bad than 2020. And during the 2020, US was even more hard hit. So what propelled you to take that decision of still going ahead with your MBA with so much uncertainty around that decision?
Right. Yeah, that's a great question because I remember we both had great jobs also back then. I was working at Microsoft, which was all fine. I was just promoted recently and everything was just good. But then I ended up going to B school because there were a few factors for me. I thought that 4 years of experience, and then I have already reached to a point where I'm a software development engineer too. So I thought that my next move should be product management, and I did not want to, let go of 1 year And although there was a lot of risk involved, there were on the brighter side, there were incentives as well, because this year there would be lesser number of MBAs graduating in general. That's what we expected, and in fact the market also recovered very well. There was no, if you look at the employment stats, there was no major impact on the employment in any sector. So it all ended up playing out well for us.
So how was your experience coping up with the pandemic, starting a new course, shifting to a different country altogether? So how was the overall experience in the US during the pandemic?
Right. So the experience initially was a little bumpy, because until the very last moment, we were not even sure if we would be able to fly. We did not have our visas. At the last moment, we got our emergency visas sorted, that too in different cities. So there was a lot of running around, and then India had its own quarantine rules. So I would be able to only go back home for a couple of days and then fly back to Delhi and then come to the US. Once I was in the US, things were a little more strict here at that point of time, in the sense that there was not a lot of in-person activity going on. We were not able to, in fact, get our bank account sorted until we completed 14 days upon entering. And with that, I did not even have my CMU ID card, so I would not be able to attend in-person classes. Although there was just one class in person every week, I was not able to attend that because of not having an ID card. So I had to wait for a couple of weeks. I traveled late, and then I had to wait a couple of weeks to get started with the program itself. So it was initially bumpy, but then eventually vaccination kicked in really well here in the US, and now things are so much better that I feel very confident that we would have completely in-person classes starting next fall.
It's so good to hear that you guys are doing very well, and a lot of opportunities are planned for you guys in the coming days. So all the best for that. Now coming to the opportunities, a lot of people from India want to go abroad, do MBA and get into product management kind of roles. So can you elaborate a bit more how easy or difficult it is from India to get into product management kind of roles in US?
Sure. I would say it's fairly easy. Eventually, there is a lot of anxiety around recruitment, because, of course, you come from India and you have a lot of loan on your head, and of course, there would be people better than you. There would be people better in some senses than you that actually matter. For example, think of MBA recruitment. In that, you would have to not just have skills. You would also want to have soft skills, which help you sell yourself, essentially. So in that sense, us Indians had a bit of a problem, but eventually things work out really well. The MBA system itself helps you prepare very well for all of the phases of recruiting. So be it interviews, you get a lot of support from your B school people, like from your second years, from career counselors and everything. There is an entire support system out here to help you succeed. So in that sense, it's a fairly easy job. There's nothing to worry at all about it. But having said that, I would say there are a few things to also look out for. For example, for people who have at least 3 years of experience, they should be fine. But people with a little less than 3 years experience, they might not be able to, get into all companies. Some companies have restricted, they have in their requirements listed out at least 3 years of work experience. For example, I know Amazon has that policy, at least as of now. So in that sense, if you check all of the boxes, you should be pretty well. And in fact, coming from a software background also helps us a lot in terms of also, understanding the industry and being able to talk to engineers, because as a product manager, your job would entail talking a lot to the engineering team. So coming from a software engineering background definitely gives you an added advantage, which a lot of people you would find in MBAs do not have. So in that sense, there's no worry at all. If at all, you should be happy that you come from a software engineering background.
So there's a lot of buzz around FAANG companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, right? And a lot of people want to become product managers in these kind of companies. But when I was networking in 2020 about the recruitment process, internship process, I came across Indians who were saying that a lot of these companies would generally have some restrictions because of your visa that you are on, right? So they would not allow you to sit for the recruitments. Have you come across any such companies, or what was your experience with the visa norms and the placement criterias?
Right. So for some companies, and these are a lot of companies which are relatively smaller. These companies have a restriction because they need work authorization, and with F1 visa, the normal student, the regular student visa that we get, we do not have work authorization right away. And to sponsor your CPT, which is essentially your work authorization for internship, companies would have to sponsor. So only a few companies sponsor in that sense. But again, in the tech world, I think a lot of major companies do sponsor. For example, Amazon does, Google does, Apple does, Netflix does, Microsoft does. So most of the companies that you would know definitely are very open-minded in terms of accepting people with any sorts of visas. But some companies do definitely, require work authorization, and hence we are unable to even apply to those companies. This is a very common problem with startups, that they do not have sponsorship built in, so they might not be able to hire international candidates at all.
So now, moving out of your professional life and the campus life, how's the life in general in US outside your campus? How are the people, the culture, food? How do you like it there?
Sure. So it was very good. In fact, I remember we, of course, land in New York, and then we came to Pittsburgh. And I've been to a couple of more cities. I've been to Miami. I've been to New York. I've been to Atlantic City in New Jersey. Every place is amazing. US is the place to be in for sure. And in fact, with now all of the restrictions being lifted up, things are getting even much better, and there are a lot of places that you can, plan your vacations and plan trips for. So in that sense, things are really good. And one particular thing, which is, I'm being a little nitpicky here, but a lot of people are worried about finding vegetarian food, right? So in that sense, I think US is a great place to be in. There's not a problem at all. People are, of course, worried about vegetarian options, but eventually we do find vegetarian options in any restaurant you go. So you need not really worry about getting Indian food and things like that. In fact, for us Indians who want to also cook Indian at home, we also get a lot of these masalas, a lot of even pre-cooked rotis and vegetables, which we can just get from the Indian stores. And Indian stores are out there in every single city. So you need not worry about your masalas, about getting vegetables, about getting any sort of Indian food. So I think in that sense, US is pretty good.
So Chirag, as we near the end of this interview, I want to ask you about your internship. What is that you are looking forward to? What kind of a role you will be joining in eBay for your internship, and what do you wish to accomplish?
Right. Sure. So with my internship, I'm going to eBay as a product manager technical, and I had three options for my internship. Two of the other companies that I didn't end up taking were in the cloud space, which is quite familiar territory for me because I come from Microsoft Azure team. So it would be my comfort zone, and it was like the place I could excel in really quickly because I won't have a learning curve. But I picked up eBay just because it was new for me. It was B2C for the first time for me. And that would be a different experience for me, understanding what their requirements are at the customer's level. At B2B level, things are different because you would think of not something very, attractive as a user experience for people because you are eventually serving another business. So you would focus more on functionality and things like that and not aesthetics and other things. So this would be a fairly new experience for me, because of which I picked eBay. And from my internship, I'm looking forward to learning about how to, the different phases of product development, because the project that I am assigned to is something that is being done from scratch. So I would be involved in all of the phases of the product development, starting from the inception of the idea to collecting data and understanding how we should proceed about it, and then preparing a roadmap. I wish to also, see some progress. I wish to see the roadmap being actually followed and something actually being delivered. That would be amazing if at all I can get that done within the frame of my internship.
And for the last question, Chirag, how does the placement thing works in US, especially in the MBA schools? Because what I've heard is it's not like the regular campus placements which we are used to in India. So you have to go out and network. Companies would come, of course, but then there's the entire process attached to it. You have to go out and network with the folks from the company, and then they'll evaluate you on different parameters, and this thing goes on, and then they send out the interview invites and other things, right? So what has been your experience?
Sure. So networking in general is something that will help you a lot. It is a skill that a lot of people lack. In fact, I also am not really good at networking, but I would say networking is something that can help you get to a lot of places really fast. So think of a condition like, if I want to understand how a PMT works at Amazon in AWS, then I can reach out to an alum and I can talk to them about their day-to-day job, and I can really understand what the role means at Amazon and how you can recruit it. So that way you would be well prepared when you recruit, and you would have a better understanding of what you're recruiting for. Having said that, there is absolutely no requirement per se for you to network to get a job, especially in the tech industry. It's not like these people end up vouching for you or recommending you or some of that sort. But in other industries like consulting, for example, some companies do have a lot of networking built into the recruiting process itself. So initially you would reach out to a lot of people. Let's say if I'm recruiting for BCG Pittsburgh office, for example, I would talk to a lot of people in the office and understand really how they work and things like that. And while we talk, they would also be assessing me as a candidate without even letting us know. So in that sense, a lot of times what happens is that these people who are in the company already, they prepare a list of people out of these networking opportunities that you take. So the more you talk, the better odds you have. But that is only with few companies. Not all companies do have it. But having said that, it's always advantageous to network, because there's no harm in it. There's just added advantage.
So Chirag, we have reached the end of this interview, and it was so amazing to have you on the show, because you answered a lot of the queries that I get on my YouTube comment section, and I'm sure it will help a lot of aspirants who want to go and do their MBA from US, right? And especially if they are aiming to become a product manager. So thank you for taking the time out. I know how busy you are. You have your internships coming up. All the best for that. And if we get comments and requests for one more interview, then we'll have you back.
No problem. It was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.